content over everything.
The police just came around and took me into
Why do you believe incest porn should be a thing?
Pornography is a sin. It should be
No, I do understand that, but why do you think incest porn should be a thing?
Good,
No, I
exactly.
don't think all pornography is a sin.
But why do you believe? Why do you believe people who promote? I understand that, but why do you believe people who promote pornography should sleep with their relatives before they produce pornography?
Look, he was mocked.
You have. It's on camera. I've got the evidence right here. I've got the evidence right here.
It should be punished by extreme violence.
So let me get this straight.
Right, I hold a very
You
right
just
wing
go
view.
around online saying that people should sleep with their relatives because they do
Let's speak about
pornography.
pornography. This is important. Let's speak
I
about
want to hear
pornography.
I want to hear the pornographer tell us about pornography.
Let's speak about pornography.
No, I just want to establish.
You
I
want
just
to
want to
talk about
establish
pornography?
before we get into a
So
serious
it's
conversation.
clear I'm a Christian and pornography is a sin and pornographers like yourself
But apparently incest
should
pornography
be,
is
should be
okay.
punished
He's
severely with the extreme right. Punished with violence.
You can't even
You
frame
want to
it.
join in?
He needs to stop. He needs to stop.
Okay, so don't interrupt, man.
You think
So
incest
you want to
pornography is
talk
okay?
about pornography? So
Incest
tell us all
pornography is
about
okay.
pornography. That's my position on pornography. It's a sin.
I just wanted to get that from you. I'll have a
It's a sin.
conversation with Pavlov.
Define
So
pornography.
what about pornography?
I'm against pornography.
Tell us why, Pavlov.
pornography.
I'm against pornography
What is it?
because,
What
first
is
of
it?
all,
I've never heard of pornography.
From the
What is
Greek,
it?
the graphic depiction of whores. Read a little.
What, your wife?
Just
okay, wait. If listen to this, guys. If Ralph was Ahmed Ali, he would have punched him. If Ralph was Ahmed Ali, he would have punched him. Just think about it for a second.
no. He would have tried to punch him and missed. He would have missed.
What kind of shitty punch was that? He missed and punched the other guy.
No,
It was funny shit. But anyway,
why are you against
So
pornography?
you're against pornography, Pavlov?
I'm against pornography because of many different reasons. The first of them is that pornography messes up with your brain, and it has been to a certain extent scientifically proven that men get a lot less motivation and a lot to actually talk to real women and to actually get real sexual intercourse or marriage or children if they watch pornography, because when they watch pornography they get the easy dopamine hits when they basically masturbate, and thus they don't have any motivation, any internal drive to go out to speak to real women and to have real
God bless you, Pavlov.
thank you. I don't share Ralph's belief that it's a sin, but I think it's bad. I think pornography shouldn't be encouraged.
He puts it on the channel.
Okay.
So gets people,
What would you say?
Okay.
What would you say?
Do you want it censored?
Pornography? No, I want it disencouraged.
Or disencourage?
I want that to
How do
be-
you disencourage people from looking at nice images?
Nice images.
Yeah, it is a good
Look,
point.
nice images. You can say nice images is a nice, green field. Nice images could be a beautiful woman in a dress.
Yeah. But you
Now-
haven't offered us a definition of pornography.
Definition of pornography. Okay. My definition of pornography is when people
Good
are
luck,
having.
by the way. Good luck.
It's not that difficult. Okay, wait. If you let me.
From the Greek, the graphic depiction of whores. Is the
Define graphic. So if they're wearing clothes,
Oh, define
they're wearing
graphic,
clothes
come on,
that are man on
man.
top of a woman, that's okay. Define graphic.
So that's the actual
See,
definition.
it's a
not the
quagmire.
definition, actually.
It's a quagmire.
2 seconds.
On you go, Pavlov. Great defense by Pavlov here, though not using a religious defense. A great moral civil defense of
No, it's just a functional defense of people. Look, pornography is not functional because it messes up with people's brains. And women, yes, and women, but mostly men, because mostly men watch porn.
And we're seeing this
Mostly men watch porn, it's true. Plus, men usually have more initiative in starting a relationship.
So lots of young girls are watching porn and they're traumatized by what they think they expect.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. So yeah, I'm against pornography.
And since Steve was allowed to do it,
Yeah, and let's just make my definition of pornography. I'll let you make your definition.
Do you mind if I just
Yeah,
answer
sure.
the question?
I've been
So,
talking for a while, so you can.
I definitely understand obviously there is, but the thing is, it hasn't actually been proved whether or not it's detrimental. That's one of the biggest mysteries and biggest myths behind pornography. The only problem is that I would say from what they've actually managed to conduct or managed to commission is that pornography has only been a benefit to society. And I'll say this in particular because they did a study, and I believe it's by Kuczynski, I believe, and he did a longitudinal study 1991 until 1990 something, 1985 until 1970s until the 1990s. He checked the rate of sexual assault and the rates of rape, right? And he was able to basically conclude that when pornography became a lot more accessible to the public, less rape, less sexual assault. And this can be seen cross-culturally in the Americas, in Europe, in China, not China, Japan as well, right? From the evidence that we do have kind of like available to us right now. Now, even if it's not on an element of like, say, saving women or saving children or saving etc., the rape, etc., let's talk about like, say, the objectification of the whole nature, right? Whether or not you believe in objectification. I would argue to a lot of people that pornography actually opens up the body image in comparison to certain media. So in terms of Hollywood, in terms of fashion industry, in terms of music videos, pornography has a more encompassing kind of like outlook as to what the human body is, and this is male and female. So from the benefits of having a little bit more of an open perspective on the male and female like body, one, and the pleasures that we can have from sexuality beyond reproduction, but also as well the diminishing or the kind of like decreasing of sexual assaults and rapes. And this is really important because even this is one that's really controversial as well. The accessibility of child material, right? Don't agree with it, but what they found is when there was more child material, particularly in Japan with all of the comics and stuff, rape within children.
Let me interrupt you for a quick second. In Japan, there are actually establishments where where they have underage girls, and it is legal. It's according to the law in Japan. It's not illegal. They have underage girls in specific establishments. I don't think the sex part is official, but it must definitely happen.
Just because I was reading literally just this week.
There are at least places where there's
they
girls.
are.
And, you know,
I think they call them like the coffee shop girls.
More or less.
Yeah.
More or less, and it's a bit darker than that.
But it's almost like...
If it's illegal, how can it be underage?
Well, with underage girls, it's the exception. You know,
it's like the social.
No, in Japan doesn't work the same way we do, because in Japan there's yakuza and people know who the yakuza are, and yet they're not attacked by the police. Why? Because the police has kind of a sort of a contract with the yakuza. Like your camera, for example, here in Speaker's Corner, it's illegal, but the police turns a blind eye because you know, there's some things to gain and there's a lot of problems that they need to face if they deny you this. It's not always like set on stone. You know what I mean?
Just before we get into the nitty-gritty of the culture, because we're talking about like the cafes and stuff. Sexual nature is not necessarily a thing. Does it happen in the thing? I have no doubt, but that's just criminal enterprise. Like that's criminal enterprise everywhere. Just from, say, even the elements that I have given you, the decrease in sexual assault, the open kind of like interpretation of women's bodies. What can we genuinely say is damaging about pornography to the society that we should really kind of like acknowledge or consider the censorship of it? I don't know. Like, what do you reckon?
Okay, so as far as I understand, the benefits in pornography that you see is first of all the decrease in rape that it produces. Secondly of all, a bigger awareness of the body, of how it works. You know, actually, fun fact that probably not too many people know: pandas can't have sex unless they see other pandas having sex. No, it's true.
No, I can imagine, but
it's true. You can look it up. I'm not lying about this. Pandas don't know how to have sex. If you put a male and a female panda in reproductive age who have never seen other pandas having sex, they can't do it. They need to watch pornography.
Why do they separate from other animals in that sense? Because for me personally, I had two hamsters, and they thoroughly knew how the workings of that happen. But how does that work where an animal doesn't necessarily know unless they see it? Like, how does that work?
It all depends on the evolution. It's very difficult to predict what evolutionary traits each animal will have once you separate them from the natural habitat. Like the pandas, in the natural habitat, you probably wouldn't even notice they can't have sex unless they watch others, because it happens all the time, right? In the natural habitat. But in captivity, you will notice it. Let's imagine this: there are species we don't know of, and when we know about them, we only see them in the natural habitat, and we don't know they can't have sex unless they see other beings of the same species having sex until we remove them from that habitat. You know what I mean? So there might be more. There might be more animals and more creatures like that who have those qualities. But either way, let me address about the rape. Well, to be fair, if you castrate all the men, there will be zero rape. So I don't think watching pornography is a good enough solution. It's a very high price to pay. Very, very high price to pay to risk the messing up with your mind just so there's a little bit less rape. Plus, I don't think that's a huge diminishing in rape. It's just that men will be less motivated to approach women either way, whether it's to rape or to just, to talk to them, in a civilized way. So I don't think it's a very good point to link it to that. But about the about the pandas and about the body image and about how the functionality of sex, you might have a little bit of a point there, because once you see how it works in pornography, once you see how things work, it can be sometimes helpful, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah, it can.
But the thing with that is, I don't think we should make it nearly as widespread as it is nowadays. If porn, I don't want to completely remove the illegal, make porn illegal. I don't want to do that. But I want there to be anti-porn media. Just tell people, if you watch too much porn, if you, commit yourself to porn, then you become separated from the real world, from what actually matters, from the functionality of the world, from the intercourse with other humans. You know what I mean? Because, again, coming back to Japan, there's a community called the Hikikomori.
Grasshopper men.
Huh?
Grasshopper men, yeah.
Yeah, more or less, kind of like that. They basically spend their whole life at home and have virtual lives.
Girlfriends and stuff, etc.
Exactly.
I agree. But the thing is, when we talk about obviously the changes in the brain, right, they've only managed to actually find out that the brain changes in the sense that it creates more pathways that are more associated with the pleasure of sexuality. So you're more kind of enticed and more kind of, your brain gets more activity during sexual pleasures or sexual cues being kind of presented to you. So that's the only way that the brain changes. In terms of actually any kind of detrimental kind of so say depression, right, a lack of activity or addiction, etc., right, these things don't actually apply to pornography. Even the concept of pornography addiction or porn addiction is not actually a concept that's accepted by the governing bodies of psychology, because it doesn't affect the body in the same way. It's not as drastic, it's not as detrimental, and a lot of the times it's more of a behavioral disorder than it is an actual addiction, a substance addiction. The difference with substance addiction and behavioral addiction is that with substance addiction, your threshold for kind of chemical activity gets boosted. So you experience all of these really uncomfortable kind of withdrawal symptoms, which really kind of make it unlivable for you. So you have to take the same drug again, but in double dose to meet that threshold again. This doesn't happen with pornography. It happens with gambling, however, which is another thing, which is not necessarily substance-based, but that can happen with gambling. You add more money into the thing, it's kind of the same kind of dosage. But with pornography, you can't actually quantify what is more of a dosage or what isn't, because it has different categories.
I can't really agree to that. You might say it's subjective.
It is, but I think I know where you're heading.
It is subjective, yeah, but still. Look, if pornography didn't work, at least in a similar way that drugs do, basically that you watch pornography, it logically does. Logically, pornography needs to work the same way because it works on dopamine, and dopamine is a drug. Dopamine is the main drug, the one drug that we all, basically gives sort of a purpose to our life. Why do beings feel pleasure with sex? Because all the beings that didn't feel pleasure didn't have the motivation to have sex.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's an evolutionary trait that was developed through millennia.
But funny, that's not how the mechanics actually work. So I'll give you an example. If you have 2 women instead of 1 woman, are you going to have better sex? If you have 3 women, are you going to have better sex? The mechanics are just not the same. So even if we go into pornographic categories, right? Say someone is into big bumps, right? And then someone is into big boobs or whatever, right? Well, at least we agree on one thing.
At least we agree on one thing.
If someone is into those different categories, then they don't get the same kind of boost from other categories. So that's what makes it subjective and not the same way kind of you can't administer it the same way as drugs. If you have a drug with more doses, it's going to have much more of effect, and as you go up and so on. So you can actually predict that kind of the fallout from that. With pornography, you can't necessarily at all. So when we talk about say even on an addiction basis, they did the study to find out whether or not people could actually get addicted to pornography. They did commission this, and they found out it was maybe less than 4 to 2% of the population that could possibly get addicted to pornography. And a lot of times as well, the people who were addicted didn't have behaviors that amassed any kind of further further not being able to kind of like function in society. So it didn't take away from their actual like normal well-being or normal kind of like function in daily society. So when we talk about like obviously again the detriment of pornography to the society, like the pro-porn side is trying its hardest to bring all of the facts to the table. And I say facts because there are some studies that have been done, notably not enough, but the studies that have been commissioned, especially by the US government as well, I'll give you a story, go more in the favor of proving that pornography helps to diminish a lot of aggression in our society or a lot of aggressive behavior.
Again, look, it's the same argument we had already. If you castrate all men, they become less aggressive.
But the thing is, if you castrate...
But you castrate all men, is that a
But the
price
thing is,
enough to
if
pay?
you castrate all men, a lot of the time castration comes with side effects such as depression, side effects such as low motivation, low stimulation, all of that, right? That's a very...
Exactly.
That tends to be the kind of like, that's why they don't
There's a
really...
lot more depression in having testosterone repressed in yourself. Like living for example, living at home in your basement and jacking off every day instead of actually having a real life. It's a lot more depressing than being a eunuch, for example. Through history, there have been many eunuchs, sometimes even the ruling classes of eunuchs, like in China. There have been sometimes...
But then that's very different.
Eunuchs
When
were
you're
the
talking
ruling
about
class.
eunuchs, you're talking about a specifically not even socially,
Castrated.
biologically engineered kind of like class of people who have been set to achieve a certain standard. So even when we're talking about, say, in the Islamic kind of like, not the Islamic, sorry, the Arab kind of slave trade, they had eunuchs who were built for mainly just the protection, soldiering and being bodyguards. They were specifically made for
Sultans,
that.
their harems were watched by eunuchs.
Absolutely. So again, there's a functionality to that, and a lot of the times that's where the kind of like, I guess the purpose and the drive comes from that. But there's a reason why.
Many men, sorry,
Yeah.
and many of the Mamluks were castrated. So
Many of the
Mamluks, the slave warriors.
Yes. Yeah.
Many of them were castrated.
Yeah. So there's like, again, even now when we talk about, like, say, castrating rapists and castrating child molesters, etc., there's still an ethical argument behind that, because you're further kind of like affecting, ironically, their well-being and their kind of like their mental health, basically. Whereas pornography has less of those side effects. And then furthermore as well, even say like on the body thing, right? When we're talking about, like you say, a medium, and you say that you don't want it to be as pushed out there, I would agree. I don't really want it something that becomes mainstream, because I like my pornography where it's someone who is invested in their sexuality, enjoys their sexuality, and it's a passion to them, right? That's the difference. There's a lot of women who do join certain pornography because they need money. And unfortunately, you can see it in the talent, you can see it in how they fall out of the industry as well, and the problems that they kind of have following that as well. But the only
we
problem
could talk
is,
about the gender pay gap between male and female
oh,
porn
Jesus
actors.
Christ, no, we can't. That's ridiculous.
I'm joking,
That's
I'm joking.
ridiculous.
Well, of course, female porn actresses get paid more, of course.
Yeah, but
It's only natural.
But again, like even on that kind of like conversation, there's so much that pornography kind of like provides other women in terms of like, again, like financial opportunities, right?
Yeah, okay, but prostitution provides women with opportunities, and it's not something to be encouraged. Like, you can't just say, okay, if you want a job, become a prostitute.
But
it
why?
doesn't work, because not, man. It's not functional for the society. If you encourage females to be prostitutes, then the structure of family will collapse with a big bang.
But then I guess you're kind of like, thank you. I think, do you not think you're focusing too much on the structure of society or family?
But it is one of the most important things in society, family.
No, I do understand, but from what I understand, family is more kind of like a coherence of people kind of like wanting to better each other's development, emotional attachment, and actually like progress through life. It's not just rooted around sex or the sexuality. It's a big part, and I give you that.
Yeah.
But it's not the central theme around it. Like when you raise children, you don't raise them with
Exactly. Children is what family is all about, because children are the future, and he who controls the children controls the future.
Right.
You know what I mean? If there is no children, there's no future. And if I can give you this time, I'm actually going to defend the Muslims. If you look at an Islamic society, they have a lot more children than in a Western society. Why is that? Well, many different reasons. I won't say it's all because of porn, don't worry. But one of those reasons is definitely pornography.
Right.
Because there's no motivation to actually have sex with real people.
Right.
To actually, and most importantly of all, to actually have children with real people. You know what I mean? Because if you just have dopamine at home, you're basically cheating your evolutionary traits, which is to feel pleasure by giving birth to more creatures such as yourself, more people,
But then,
to spread and prosper, the purpose of life.
but then this is again where I try to kind of like apply my knowledge in terms of pornography and like sexuality. And it's mainly sexuality. People kind of push me as this pro-pornography. My thing is sexuality, like full stop.
Okay.
Pornography just seems to fall under that umbrella, and it's the one that people most are exposed to. Even when we're talking about, say, Islam, right? And it's kind of like pattern of procreating and so on and so on. I would put that more to the patriarchal structure of Islam rather than the fact that there's less pornography. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the kind of like the amount of money that pornography generates, which is it's ridiculous.
Now we're talking about the
It's-
real business. Why is the government not opposing it? Because of the
Well,
money, of course.
Of course. But
They're
when
earning
we-
millions with it.
Millions, billions.
Billions. Millions. I'm talking about like one porn organization.
Like
but
the
all of
whole
them, yeah,
industry
billions.
itself is bigger than
huge, yeah.
the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball combined. And
course.
that says volumes about how much we kind of like
They
crave.
lose it. They lose a lot of money.
Yeah, but it also says how much as human beings we crave and we actually are drawn to this kind of like spirit of affection and sexuality.
Of course, it's the most important spirit because, look, even if we are a bunch of waste men our whole life, no, but seriously,
It's true,
I'm
it's
using
true,
waste
it's
men.
true, it's true.
Even if we completely fail at life and are a bunch of useless idiots, if we have children, there's still the potential of the children becoming something better. There's still that hope, that small glimmer of hope. If there's no children, there's no hope. Everything
then-
just finishes.
But then, just on that notion, we're pushing not necessarily the East. I would say the East as the more kind
Doesn't
of
have
like,
to be the East. The Christians were the same when they still had the family values as
Oh no,
their main
I
core.
was talking about the family, just on our point about the family and Islam, right? So I was using
We
the
can
East.
talk about Islam.
the East as a proxy,
It's-
kind of like.
in that case, in that regard, it's not very different from Christianity, I would say,
It's not. But the thing is, in the East, right?
or Judaism. For
In
that
the
point.
East, there is probably a higher use of pornography than there is in the
the
West.
East?
In the East.
Really? In the
Yeah.
Middle East?
Because when we look at how much, like, where the money is distributed in terms of where the money is coming from pornography, the East is quite
The Middle
predominant. Yeah, the Middle East is quite predominant in providing the porn industry with the money that it does. Because most people here use sites like Pornhub, use sites like Xvideos, right? And these are not paid for sites. These are sites that you get your videos for free. So we're not even paying into our pornography for the most part. Disproportionately, other countries are paying more for their pornography. Well, so let me not say paying more for their pornography, but like paying quite equally into the pot of things. So even when we talk about Islam, not necessarily, you know, promoting pornography, like the actions of people within that sector of the world is completely different. So even the whole idea that pornography is, again, help decreasing the likelihood of people having birth rates and stuff, it's a bit of a loose point. Like, we could go into it, and I think research maybe later on could help us understand that, but I think that's more of a cultural thing than it is, and especially more of a modern industrialization thing than it is anything to do with
Might have a point.
pornography.
I
and the
don't know.
access
I
of
don't know if
pornography.
more
Bear in
porn
mind-
is being used in the Middle East. Honestly, I really don't know about that, so I'm not gonna argue against it or defend it.
Well,
But yeah,
the reason, another thing really is that pornography hasn't just existed during the digital age either. Like we have
not, yeah.
the Egyptian papyri, which is just like, you know, the oldest porn
There's
mag
many different ways
in the
of
world.
pornography.
Absolutely, but you know,
there's some art that's very close to pornography. Like the line
is pornography.
doesn't exist. The line
Yeah.
doesn't really exist. All we can do is like a rough line somewhere where it's functional.
Yeah.
Somewhere where it doesn't actively mess up with your brain and doesn't make you just, you know, masturbate to the image and actually go for the real person. But sorry, go ahead.
no, but again, even say the messing up of the brain, just to bring it back to that point in particular, we have so many other elements which are actually proven to like decrease our actual IQ. We have statistics to show that. Like, so alcohol, right? Alcohol
Oh, yeah, definitely.
and binge drinking and so on, right? This has been proven to actually decrease, you know, certain things like, was it lead in the wall and all of this kind of like minute stuff.
Yeah, tobacco, alcohol,
Yeah.
drugs. Yeah.
And these are things that we not only promote in our culture, but we kind of like have frivolently kind of like excelled into, you know, the amount of things that people can do with their cigarette butts and the amount of drink that someone can drink within an afternoon now. Women,
Yeah, it's socially acceptable.
women drink, you know, a
unfortunately.
bottle of wine every night, and you know, bottle of wine used to be back in the day.
Yeah, we see
something
it as
that you would
something
say
funny,
throughout.
something popular to get drunk. Oh, he's drunk. Oh, my man,
Yeah.
he got drunk. It's not something to be proud of.
No,
You know,
no.
as somebody who lived in Eastern Europe, I
No.
know the big problems of getting drunk, and it really fucks up everything.
That's another thing. Eastern Europe as
Yeah,
well. I
some
think
of the worst cases of of mass drunkenness happened in Eastern Europe, and it's it's funny because it basically started with Ivan the Terrible. The big problems with drinking started with him because he did a big business on the vodka.
okay.
After Ivan the Terrible, there was like a whole thing about the Russian Empire, and the business of the vodka, the selling of the vodka and the creation was only belonging to the crown. Only to the
Okay.
crown. They were the only ones earning money from it. Because obviously drunken peasants are easier to rule than
yeah.
actually, thinking peasants. Now, it was funny because when the Russian Empire fell and the communists took over, one of the few good things that they actually did was remove
A
that.
few good things.
Very few good things. Very, very, very good few
Well,
good
you can have
things.
another one. Yeah. go.
With Lenin, they removed that. But with Stalin, they brought it right back. Because Stalin knew, and Stalin wanted to go the way of Ivan the Terrible. Lenin had a dysfunctional ideology, but at least he had like good motives. He wanted to do
yeah.
something good.
Yeah.
He wouldn't do any good. He would mess up everything, but at least he wanted to make it better. Stalin didn't have any illusions with that. Stalin just wanted absolute
Stalin was a
power,
monster from
absolute
day one.
control. Yeah.
He was a monster
But
from day
yeah, it was kind of a detour. Let's come back to what actually matters. About pornography once again. Look, we'll have to get. I'll try my best not to go to personal preferences and all that stuff because it's stupid to go on that on camera. We'll just get ridiculed, and this won't go anywhere. But as far as I know, when people watch porn, they usually like watching porn of not always the same person.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not always the same person. You like variety.
When it comes to men, yeah.
Well, okay. I don't know if females are different.
I'll
but
elaborate.
Either way.
Let me let you finish first.
Okay,
Go on, bro.
Okay, let's at least for men that's how it is. As far as I researched and as far as I know, for myself and for other people who I spoke to. You like variety. People like variety in that. They watch they open 10 videos. They watch a part of this video, part of that video, blah 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 blah. It's and it this part I'm not talking.
We have a lot more in common.
Well, look, it's not about you and me. It's about
just general as a male species.
It's
Absolutely.
about probability.
Yeah.
That's how it is. I've done some research about it, and I know that that's how it is.
Yeah.
We're not talking personally here. We're talking about a bigger issue.
That's it. But again, there's between the lines. There is like you were saying, people build up, and it's this thing of like having different partners. And it's funny. Again, I was reading something literally just on this, and they found out it's the differences between the sexes that is definitely very apparent when it comes to pornography. Men tend to enjoy, like they did basically a study in which they watched the video and there were two performers. And they watched this throughout the week. Then by the end of the week, they would then ask, would you prefer this video with two different actors, or would you prefer this video with the same actors, but in different scenarios? The split between men and women was obvious. Men preferred where there was multiple or different partners. Women, however, preferred the same people, but in different scenarios. Showing that women oftentimes, when they view the material, and this is why women tend to kind of like gush more for like, mainstream media kind of like depictions
To belong.
all of the Twilight, etc. So
Bigger necessity to belong.
yeah, exactly. But it's also that long-term promise of affection as well that
Exactly.
women prioritize,
Exactly.
as opposed
men
to
and
men.
women are not attracted to the same thing.
Not
Men
sexually, no.
are more attracted to the physicality, and it's almost all about the physicality.
Yeah.
When women are attracted to, it's more complicated.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
to more
But
different
even then,
things.
like,
Status, power, money.
but say from
a
that,
lot of things.
we can then understand why there's such a rift between young boys and young girls, right? When this hookup culture doesn't necessarily manifest or fruition in the way that we would hope it would. It's because men and women, like you say, and like the study does show, have very different investments when it comes to just having sexual liaisons. It doesn't necessarily mean that women want to have kids, a child, and a family or whatever, but they would like that reassurance that someone is not just using them for a one-night stand, whereas men just like the opportunity of having openness and availability to them. So there's a lot that you can understand, and there's a lot that you can like apply from that moving forward. And I think that's maybe where the difference is between like not necessarily understanding, but the difference is between positions. I see it as something that porn is a medium. It has brutal kind of like categories and stuff that shouldn't really be on show.
Indeed.
But at the same time, it does have the possibility especially in the accessible kind of like range it is now, to be a medium. And it's up to us as to whether or not we want to invest in better pornography for people to actually learn, understand, and kind of incorporate their own sexuality in a more positive, progressive way, or we just kind of like let it go and then let men and women be men and women as they've been for like ages. And historically, men and women just haven't been the greatest sexual partners when it comes to, you know, satisfying each other, you know, long term, short term, etc. Like, women often complain the fact that they don't really get their needs met to, and a lot of the times, if you speak to men quite like normally on the surface, you will find out why that is, because men are not, they're not kind of like thinking about women's pleasure, they're thinking about their own pleasure. But then even that's a really simple reduction, because it's like in this culture where men and women, men in particular, have to jump through various hoops in order to get to a woman, right?
Of course, yeah.
Why
It's only
would,
natural.
why would I then bother about your pleasure if I've had to jump through various hoops? So there's so many things that you could like.
But you're only helping my point. Men
No,
have
I
to
do
jump through
understand
many hoops to get women.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, they got this easy pleasure, easy dopamine, porn. They can just lock themselves in their room and jack off.
It's true, but the only thing is,
Why go through the trouble at that point?
but the only thing is as well, I do think there's an element of that doesn't realize that men as well crave affection beyond just sleeping around.
a lot less than women.
A lot less. No, a lot less. But I think we run a danger of like ignoring that, and I think this is where a lot of
Men have feelings too.
Yeah, no, seriously, bro. Seriously, like I feel like this is where
Yeah, but their
male
feelings are
suicide
different.
is-
That's the point.
They are
Their
different.
feelings are very different too.
But we don't disregard them, is what I'm trying to say.
Of course we can't.
basically.
Yeah, of course.
But-
I understand what you mean.
I'm gonna go around.
Oh, fair
It was good. It was good talking about
conversation.
pornography, because a lot of people don't really want to have that conversation.
No, we should have the conversation. We should have any conversations. It's important.
Tywin Lannister, really?
Yes, the only one who could keep order in the Seven Kingdoms. Yes,
No.
I'll defend him for 1,000 years, man.
That is.
Tywin Lannister. Tywin,
At
vote
least,
Tywin.
At least Jamie. At least.
Oh come on, the incest brother, the stupidest Lannister, as Cersei calls him. Come on.
Yeah, it was bad.
He's pretty dumb.
When I found out that he couldn't even like, his literacy was really bad, and then Tywin forced him, it's a bit mad. But
Tywin was a genius, man. He got his house out of nowhere.
I don't know. Like,
He was a genius. He was the
there's
only
so-
one who could keep order.
there's so many characters you could have before Tywin. Bro.
Okay, we'll have that conversation a bit later. Let's have that
There's so many
conversation.
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
It's important.
Tywin Lannister, really?
Yes, the only one who could keep order in the Seven Kingdoms. Yes, I'll defend him for 1,000 years, man. Tywin Lannister. Vote Tywin.
At least Jamie.
Oh come on, the incest brother, the stupidest Lannister, as Cersei calls him. Come on.
Yeah, it was bad.
He's pretty
When I
dumb.
found out that he couldn't even like, his literacy was really bad. And then Tywin forced him, it's a bit mad.
Tywin was a genius, man. He got his house out of nowhere.
No, like.
He was a genius. He was the
there's
only
so-
one who